There he is.
Shut up, Tim. Good afternoon and welcome to... That's not how I start these. Hey, it's Alirien and welcome to part 2, probably. I'll correct myself in text if that's wrong, of making Lady Sybil Rochester, Viscountess of Ashbourne. I am working on the farthingale today. So you will have already seen start to finish the making of the pair of bodies. Today, I am making a farthingale, which is basically a Renaissance hoop skirt. So I am currently already tracing off the pattern, and because I am low on time and also because this isn't really that complex of a garment, it's a 7 paneled skirt. So you cut the front on the fold, 2 side fronts, 2 side backs, and 2 center backs. Stitch it all together, add in tape to make channels for the hoops, aka boning. I have somewhere some reed that I should be able to use for the farthingale, which is the better option out of this. I need to find that, but I'm already tracing. I have the center front traced and I'm working on the center back right now, and then I'll trace off the 2 side pieces and find fabric that will fit these as close as possible. This will probably be pieced simply because I'm using the first materials that I find. I may use this because it's got like a seersucker texture to it. I think it is seersuckered. Yeah, it is. I also have a crap ton of navy blue. I actually have 2 bundles of the navy blue, so I might prioritize that. I've got so many cotton prints. I have so much cotton. So yeah, I'm gonna get right back to tracing. I probably am going to seem and sound a bit rushed. I'm trying to see if I can knock out at least the main garment, if not getting the casings in and the boning into the casings and everything done up for Saturday. Today is Thursday the 7th, and I have a workshop on the morning of Saturday the 9th of July. For the sake of A, getting used to the garments, and B, being a demo for a lot of our newer nobility, and also just to prove to people who I think are doubting me a little bit of whether or not I can get all of this done in time because I started very late. Just as proof positive of several things, I would like to be able to wear the pair of bodies, the farthingale, and if I can knock it out in time, the bum roll, all to the workshop. I'm gonna keep tracing. I'm like a quarter of the way through tracing patterns. And then once this is traced, we will get to cutting. Hopefully this will turn out to be very, very simple. The only thing I'm not sure about is the length of this garment. Obviously it sits at my natural waist and it should be no longer than floor length. I need to find the boots I will be wearing. That's the thing I need to do. So that A, I can break them in. I'm wearing those on Saturday. And B, I need to hem the skirts based on how tall I am in the boots, which the boots shouldn't be adding more than an inch to my height, so I'd probably be fine. But yeah, let's get a pattern traced and then we'll worry about... I've been working on this. I have a really bad habit of thinking way too far ahead and planning out like 20 steps in advance, which is way too much. I need to take things like up to 5 things at a time. Honestly, up to 6 things, because it's been shown that under high stress, the average person can remember up to 6 people, and I'm expanding that to and or things at any given time while under that high duress. I need to not plan more than 6 steps ahead if I can avoid it. Yeah, okay, enough talking. Tracing. So now that I have the pattern ready, I have already gone ahead and laid out my fabric and laid out the first pattern piece, but I'm going to go ahead and get these cut and marked and get the vertical seams sewn.
Don't forget to butter your
So the actual farthingale is 4 pattern pieces. It's the skirt front, 2 side fronts, 2 side backs, and 2 backs because there's a center back seam. I am continuing to use the ladies underpinnings patterns from Margo Anderson for this. So, the farthingale, based on what was known in period as a Spanish farthingale due to its origin in Spain. So the farthingale came out of Spanish fashion of the time. It was a hooped petticoat worn by middle and upper class women and began to be fashionable in the 1530s and remained so until the late 1580s when it began to be replaced by the drum-shaped French farthingale. The Spanish farthingale continued to be worn by the less fashionable and for less formal occasions for several more years. The term farthingale derived from verdugados, the Spanish word for green twig. The hoops were often made of young branches of willow and other flexible wood. This pattern is derived directly from Juan de Alcega's Tailor's Pattern Book, published in 1589. The pattern given was made to fit 22-inch fabric, which was the standard width of silk. However, a pattern cut to this limit will only fit a small, short woman. Therefore, we've drafted the pattern to modern fabric widths. It can be made of any sturdy woven fabric. I'm probably going to use a hefty cotton, a quilting cotton. Many of Elizabeth's were made of silk. I'm not spending the money on silk. Linen and tightly woven lightweight wool may also have been used. We find cotton is most practical today. Broadcloth sheeting or quality muslin are all good choices. Cotton polyblends can also be used, but they do not breathe as well as cotton. Most commercially available hoop skirts and farthingales for theatrical use are white or natural. This is due to them being generally made for bridal use, and theatrical ones are usually intended to be stock garments reused for many, many shows over many, many years. In both cases, it is necessary to make them in white, so there will be no risk of color showing through. However, white farthingales become grubby fast, and the hoops need to be removed in order to wash them, so it's recommended for a medium or dark toned color in order to not show the age and the dirt as readily. Designed for use with commercial hoop wire, 2 wires of spring steel held half an inch apart by a casing of buckram or plastic. Many other materials such as metal strapping, plastic hose, and drain snake can be used. All right then. I do actually have reed somewhere, and if I don't have enough, I will be ordering more from corset making supplies. For casings, another area in which we've departed from the original. Casings were made in the original by sewing tucks into the fabric, but this is very difficult to do evenly, so we recommend using bias casings. Many modern hoop skirts have drawstring waistbands, but these tend to stretch and sag. Our waistband sandwiches the seam allowance between 2 lays of grosgrain ribbon fastened with hooks and eyes. Okay, so I have determined I will need the size 14, and this is based on the waist measurement on Sybil's waist measurement while wearing the, I keep moving the wrong way, while wearing the smock and the pair of bodies together. Her waist measured to just over 32 inches. The size 14 is for a 31-inch waist, and since this is a tied-on garment and the stays don't lace up as tight as they could, we're leaving some wiggle room in the event that she loses a little weight. If she gains a little weight, there won't be too much of a problem there. The one thing I'm not sure of is how long this will need to be. I will probably cut the mock-up to full length and then figure out where it needs to be shortened to based on her height wearing her boots, and then we will adjust and make the final. I'll probably only need 1 mock-up with this one though, so the farthingale and the bum roll should be fairly easy. Really the only tricky thing is how the hoops are going to behave, because I've never worked with that aspect before. Flat fell seams, that's probably what I'll go ahead and do. Leave the top 7.5 inches open, good to know. Okay, yeah, you can kind of see her. We've got the Duchess over here, who just tried to bite my finger. I did attempt to start this garment the last time I was trying to build Sybil. I do even still have the blue cotton version that I had hastily thrown together because I was skipping the mock-up that time. But it is a size too big. As I said, we are going with a size 14. This was traced off with a 16. So what I'm actually going to do is attempt to use this same pattern trace off and just trim it down to the 14 so that I can conserve some paper. I do have extra paper set aside if I absolutely need it. Ideally, I will only need one of these pieces, and it will be used to trace off the bum hole. Hopefully this means that the tracing section goes much faster. I can then move on to cutting out the muslin, and maybe, hopefully, we will actually have enough time to maybe start stitching the mock-up together. 12, 14. Man. I knew as soon as I started working, somebody was gonna have to come put herself in the middle of everything. On the tissue, too. You're a menace. You're the worst. Yeah, I think I might start stitching. So this will be a first. I'm gonna go get Jerome, and I think I'll stitch up some seams. Let's see. Hello. The Roxanne is coming to investigate. Gotcha. Unless otherwise stated, seam allowance is 5/8. Got it. That's pretty standard for commercial patterns. Oh, let me come fix the chat box while I'm thinking. There we go. Alright, so it's not done, but it's as done as it needs to be for tonight. There is at least half of a farthingale. It's Alirien, and today we are working on Sybil's farthingale and bum roll. Once again, you will have seen on stream that we not only cut out the pattern and the mock-up fabric, but we actually stitched up the mock-up. We have done the fitting, and it's perfect as is, both garments. So we are moving forward with the final. I have already cut out the fabric for both. This is the wrong side of it, but this is our very fun fabric for the farthingale. We're gonna get started stitching this up. I'm gonna start with the farthingale first because it's the longer seams. I have some green thread set aside that I will be using for such. First order of business is just to stitch up all of the vertical seams, and I did not worry about notches this time because the pattern seems to have the notches misaligned, which is irritating, and I'm not gonna worry about resetting them. I'm just gonna line them up at the waistline, and that way whichever hemline is uneven I will trim up because it doesn't need to be floor length. And once she's got everything on with like the overskirts and her boots on and everything, it probably won't trail the floor anyway. We're gonna do the vertical seams, and I'm going to press I'm going to press, trim, and flat fell each vertical seam as I get it done. I'll probably stitch up all of the seams except for, thank you, Roxanne. The point of flat felling in this case is so that the hooping, the reed here, which I did find, will not catch on the seam allowances when I thread it through the channels. I also have a crap ton of twill tape of a few different widths. I'm gonna try to work through this really nice cotton stuff first, and I actually also have some plain white bias tape, so I'm going to try to work through those first for the hoop channels, and then once I run out of those I will switch to the actual twill tape, and I'll start with the wide stuff first and work my way down. This is like last case, like last ditch effort if I absolutely need some, but I can also just run out and grab more. I have ordered connectors for the hoops, which are shipping from Canada. That will take a bit to get here. Basically, I'm gonna get as far as I can in the farthingale. until those get here, and then work on the bum roll in that interim space. Hopefully that gives enough time for the connectors to get here. We can connect the hooping and get it done. If for some reason the connectors aren't here in time, my idea is to tape them together. I'll get like some really good electrical tape, or I have a crap ton of duct tape. That is the fallback plan to connect the ends of the hoops if for some reason the brackets aren't here in time. So this will be interesting. Let me pull up and read the directions involving the hooping on here, because for whatever reason I've had it in my head that I might not have enough. I guess it's just like a worry, so I'm gonna look through, see what it says regarding the hooping. One sec. So according to this, my reed might technically be the wrong material, because she has written here, let me rephrase, it's not the intended material. Their pattern's designed for commercial hoop wire, which is 2 lengths of wire made of spring steel, held 1/2 inch apart by a casing of buckram or plastic. Many other materials such as metal strapping, plastic hose, or drain snake may be used as a substitute. I'm just gonna use the reed because I have so much of it that I may as well. Now it is 1/4 inch wide as opposed to this, like, it seems like each wire is 1/2 inch wide or 1/4 inch wide. Yeah, each wire is 1/4 inch wide and then they're 1/2 inch apart, so altogether it makes an inch roughly. So what I might end up doing is where there's supposed to be a single length of hoop wire, I might just make a doubled channel to finish the ends of the hoop wire so they will slide easily through casings by wrapping the ends with adhesive tape. Use an awl or a hand drill to make holes 1/2 inch apart from each other at the ends of the hoops, which I'm not going to bother with, and use heavy thread to whip the ends together through the holes, or alternatively, you can use surgical or duct tape. So I've got duct tape, I'll use that. It's merely not recommended as the method to use because it makes it more difficult to pull the hoops apart and take them out in order to clean the farthingale. I'm not worried about this. If any part of the farthingale needs to be washed, it'll be the bottom, and so if I need to replace the hemline hoop, I can do that. It's okay, so it'll be fine. We are going to start with some vertical seams. Oh good, okay. The center back seam is the last vertical seam that you do. That'll make it nice and easy. And the back seam is not flat felled. You merely press the seam allowances under themselves and stitch them down. So it's kind of flat felling, but instead of folding both sides of the seam allowance over into one line, you have 2 lines of slightly thinner flat fell. That'll do. Alright, yeah, let's pull Jerome out and we'll start stitching. One thing I forgot to mention is that when I was cutting out the side pieces, I wanted to make the most use of the fabric I had left. Unfortunately, it meant that this section here, this corner, from like here to the corner, was running off of the fabric. So I do have an extra piece cut to piece on, so I'm actually going to do that part first, and I will probably go ahead and flat fell that seam just outright while I'm sitting here, and then we'll do all the vertical seams. Alright, I know the lighting's awful. The only light I have is what's coming through the window in front of me in a rainstorm, but my power just went out, so I don't get to work on this right now. I heard an awful, very loud pop, and the lights all immediately went out. So I suspect a transformer blew. And I'm annoyed because I can see the house across the street still has their power because their front porch light is on. I love power grids! This is gonna be take 2 on trying to get all of this sewn together. The camera is about to die, so I will need to plug it into charge for most of this, but I'll show you at least a couple of the seams being done. But each of the vertical seams on the farthingale is pretty much the same thing all the way through. So I'll show you the piecing and one of the vertical seams, and then part of the flat felling after this charges, and then we'll move on from there. Here is the inside, the flat felled seam sewn down, and there is the outside, but that is the last corner pieced on. You can barely tell. There's a slight difference in the hemline, but the hemline will get trimmed and shored up to itself later. But piecing in action. I've actually even managed to line up this cat almost perfectly. So the pattern almost matches exactly there. So now we piece the other side. This isn't the best angle, and I just showered, so my hair is kind of a mess and kind of wet and gross, but bear with me. So I have all of the, I knocked my thread snips off the desk. Okay, I have all of the side vertical seams stitched up and flat felled. So now we do the back center seam. I have measured 7.5 inches from the top. That's what this pink pin here, you can see in front of my fingertip there, is marking. And I've pinned all the way down, and I'm gonna stitch that, press the seam allowance open and flat, and then turn each seam allowance under the 1/4 inch and stitch them down, essentially doing a half fell. And the brackets to hold the hooping together at the ends did get here today. I'm not sure if I actually have enough. If I don't, I will tape them until I can get more brackets. We will work with what we've got. So let's stitch up the center back. Someone's helping again. Ma'am, please stop bonking the camera. Come on. Weirdo. Hi, no, you can't come climb on my lap. I have the back seam stitched, and I have pressed the seam allowance open, turned under the edges, and pressed it flat again. So I'm gonna run 2 lines of stitching to hold these down, and I have pressed all the way up to the waistband, even though it's not connected at the waistband. You can see how it's falling open right there. That is the gap for the waist opening. But I am still going to stitch the seam allowance down all the way up, and then it says to stitch several times across the spot where the opening is, right here, in order to strengthen it and reinforce it. So I'm going to do those 2 steps now. Stitch down the seam allowances and then stitch across here to get it as strong as possible. Now has come the difficult part, and this is kind of one of the parts I was dreading, because I noticed over time that this pattern has one major issue, and it's starting to affect what is arguably the most important step here, and that is the marking and the placement of the bias tape or twill tape, whatever you use, the channels for the hoop, for the reed, the steel, whatever you use for it. It seems that somewhere along the way in creating this pattern, the 4 pattern pieces you use may not have properly been walked or worked together against each other, because I've noticed that there are notches missing. My best course of action was to line up the waist for some of these pieces, and even that did not quite line up. I've already had to trim parts of the side and back pieces in order to line up with the front waistline, and I'm gonna have to trim a lot on the hem. The markings on the pattern pieces for where the hoop channels go do not line up with each other. They don't. They are different heights from their waistlines. So if the waistlines are uneven and then the hoop casings are uneven, then you can't have a continuous circle of hoop properly going around the form. I'm not sure what happened here. I did not come across any true issues like this with the pair of bodies or the shift patterns. The hoop skirt is really the first one that I've struggled with, and it is faults of the pattern from what I can tell. This is kind of concerning. Like, I'm not claiming to be an expert on how the historic garment would have been made, but I do know something about pattern making because I went through years of learning how to do it in college, and I've struggled myself with drafting patterns from scratch. Y'all watched me go through 6 versions of the cargo pants before I finished Kim. One of the really big aspects is to make sure that your pieces properly line up, not just so that you have no issues in constructing the garment, but so that your success with your pattern can be recreated by other people. Things need to be marked very, very clearly of where they need to line up. Somewhere along the way, at least with this farthingale, no one bothered to walk the pattern edges against each other. I have a quick little video somewhere, I'll link it below or in the cards, of how this works. It might only be on Instagram though, I'm not sure. I'll find it and link it however I can, it'll at least be in the description. But it's disappointing that I now have to hope that I'm doing this right myself from scratch instead of following the markings of the pattern, because the markings of the pattern are going to have bone and channels be completely misaligned on the piece to begin with. There's also, I've just come across the waistband instructions, and I am going to completely do this differently. What they want me to do is use a 1-inch strip of grosgrain ribbon as the waistband. I would rather have a little more wiggle room on that. I'm going to probably find, because I'm basically out of this cat cotton, so I'm gonna grab a different swatch of fabric and cut a strip probably 1.5 inches, and I will use grosgrain ribbon and I will stitch that into the waistband as I stitch the waistband on. So it's not gonna be like a drawstring, it'll just be attached. Because it also does instruct to put a hook and eye to attach this at the back. I'm gonna have it tie. There's also instructions for gathering, and I'm not sure. I don't know. It seems like there was less care given to making sure this pattern went together properly than there was with the pair of bodies. Because I can even, like, even in the printed instructions, 2 of the pictures are on the wrong step from each other. It's very concerning. I am much less pleased with this pattern than I was with the last 2. Luckily, the bum roll will be super easy. That should have no real issues that I can imagine, but I am now wary moving forward into some of the other pieces like the overskirts and the bodice and the sleeves and such. I'm getting a little nervous about the more complicated stuff that still waits. We will push through and do the best we can. But basically, because of the misalignment on the pattern, I have taken the measurement from the top of the pattern to the top of the first casing at the center back, and I am keeping that measurement consistent all the way around the top waistband. I have also measured the distance between the casings, like from the bottom of the first one to the top of the next one, and it's consistently 7.5 inches between each hoop casing. So that's a little bit easier. And the casings are supposed to be 1-inch bias tape, so that also makes it easy. I'll just mark a 1-inch gap and then 7.5 inches and then 1 inch and so on. Depending on what that gets me as far as the spacing down the way, if I have the room for it, and even if it's a little bit too close, I'm probably gonna add an extra hoop at the hem just to really hold out the skirt at the base. So that one might be closer to the one above it. I'm not sure, but we will see. I would like to get one as close to the hem as possible. But yeah, right now I'm going through and marking the first one, and I will get the casings stitched down, and I will probably leave an opening near the center back for each one. Yeah, see, it even says starting 3 inches from the center back seam, edge stitch the bias, because they say to use bias tape, but they want you to leave a 3-inch space between the center back and the opening of the casing. So that is what I will do. But yeah, we're gonna get through marking. This is probably gonna be the longest step, is marking and stitching in the casings. I'll show y'all a little bit of the process, but I probably won't be able to record much because my camera's not gonna be happy with that. But yeah, just wanted to update y'all on the latest frustration. We will get through this. For anybody else who's made a farthingale or hoop skirt in the past, if you have recommendations for patterns other than the Margo ladies underpinnings, and it's been a pattern that's worked out, go ahead and drop your recommendation in the comments, because I am I'm having issues with this one, and it's particularly disappointing because it was recommended by somebody in the Ren Fair community. All right, let's get back to work. All right, I apologize for being silent from the window, but I didn't feel like moving the tripod. Forgive me. But it is the next day. We're gonna start stitching in the first hoop channel and just push through as much of adding the hoop channeling as we can, do a quick fitting to see how the gathering will affect it, and go from there. While my camera was charging yesterday, our power went out again, so I could not get any more stitching done. I did power through and mark and pin the 3 hoop casings that remain. I'm annoyed because I ran out of the normal twill and bias tapes, the white, like 6 inches from the end on the last one, so I found this green left over from Kim that I'm gonna use here so that way it blends in with the green fabric. I have also marked, I'm probably gonna go back and do it again, but I have marked where the hem needs to be trimmed to shore it up and have it be even all the way around. So that will be one of the next steps after I get the hoop casings pinned in place. Actually, trimming the hem might be the last step, just to be safe, because once everything else is done, I will hang it up overnight and then trim the hem and stitch the hem later. But because of the distance in these, there's not going to be enough length on the shortest part of the skirt to allow for another length at the proper distance for one more hoop. So I'm just gonna work with it the way it is. But yeah, we're gonna get these 3 hoop casings stitched in place and ready for hoop. And then I might go ahead and thread the reed in just to see what it looks like and see that it's doing things correctly. I'll go ahead and gather the waistband so that it's creating the correct amount of volume at the hip, and we will finagle our waistband with some grosgrain ribbon to tie it on. I need to pick my ribbon, so maybe I'll do that in a moment because all my ribbon is out and ready to sort through. But yeah, let's get these stitched on. Y'all have already seen the first one get stitched on, so I probably won't show the other 3 being done. It's been hard to get going today. Let's stitch on some hoop channels. I have gotten all of the hoop channels stitched onto the inside of the farthingale. So now I'm going to use this fabric for a waistband because I don't like the idea of using just a length of ribbon as such. So I have measured out enough waistband to match the ungathered waistband or waistline of the farthingale, just so that I know I have enough, because I have a tendency, no matter how much measuring I do, to end up with my waistbands a little too short. I'd rather have some excess and that go into the stuffing for the bum roll than have not enough and have to do some weird like piecing right at the edge. So it's gonna be longer than the gathered waistline, but that's okay. That's for my peace of mind here. I've also done some measuring and figured out what I need to gather the waistline down to. So I have that measurement in my head. So now I'm going to cut an 1.5 inch wide strip, again, to give myself enough wiggle room to get the waistband on. And I'm going to cut enough ribbon to match the gathered waistline doubled. I'm going to center that at the front center of the farthingale inside the waistband and stitch it inside the waistband so that it's a bit more sturdy, and that way this will tie on instead of being a hook. That way it can be a little bit adjustable for weight gain or weight loss. And I'm not using a pattern piece for this because I am using the selvage edge to guide my scissors. So as long as my scissors stay roughly the same distance from the white selvage edge, I will be fine. Plus the pattern here repeats pretty evenly, so I know where the scissors need to fall within the pattern. And this is a plain cotton print, so there we go. There is our very narrow waistband. So now I have increased my stitch length to 4.0, and I am going to run the gather stitches along the waistline of the farthingale. I'll also be running 2 rows of the gathers just for a bit more stability as I gather this down. Alright, it is the next morning once again. I've run the gather stitches. I have 2 gather stitches that are about 3/8 of an inch apart, and the top one's about 3/8 to 1/4 of an inch down from the top of the waistline. So I'm going to gather this down to what I think the waist measurement needs to be over the pair of bodies, just because I don't have quite the time to do one more fitting, but that's also why I'm tying this garment on instead of doing a hook. That way it's a bit more adjustable for the sake of if we need it to fit a little tighter, it can fit a little tighter. If we need it to fit looser, it can fit looser. And if at any point it gets to be too loose even for just the fixed waistline of the actual garment, then I'll start adding hooks inside, and that way we can just hook it, and then eventually I'll make a smaller one if needed. So we're gonna gather this down, and then I will measure and cut the ribbon that's gonna go in the waistband, and we'll get the waistband and the ribbon attached. Gathered, and I've distributed the gathers as best I can. I might still slide them a little closer to center front so it's less flat, but it wasn't gathered down quite as much as probably the pattern wants me to. And that's another thing that I forgot to mention earlier is that, sorry, the lighting's not great because I'm lit from one side, but bear with me. I can, if I need to, open up the waistband and like take off the waistband, take off the ribbon, and gather this down further if I need the waistline smaller. So that is another option that can be done, depending on how sturdy this remains between now and then, again, if it ever needs to occur. So yeah, we could always take in spots of the farthingale if the waist gets smaller, but this is the size we're going to work with. And so yeah, now I'm going to measure and cut the ribbon to about 64 inches, and we'll get that in the waistband attached. I stopped recording and then I realized I forgot to mention yesterday that I have decided the bum roll is going to go in a separate video. So if you're confused at all why I'm talking about the bum roll a bunch at the beginning and then suddenly there's no bum roll at the end, because I sometimes forget to actually say in videos when changes get made. So I'm gonna try to do better about that. But yeah, for the sake of having a bit more content, for the sake of anybody who finds these videos later and wants to know about a specific garment and doesn't want to have to sit through all of the building of the farthingale just to get over to the bum roll, for the sake of my analytics, so that people are not skipping the first like huge segment of this video just to get to the bum roll, or they're not watching the end because they only care about the farthingale. It seems better if I divide all the pieces to individual videos, regardless of how long or short that might make them. So initially the partlet was going to be in with the bodice. I'm going to do the partlet separately. I'm already doing the sleeves separately from the bodice because that is going to be a whole animal in and of itself, especially because I'm doing two types of sleeves for the finished garment. So now I'm gonna go ahead and do the bum roll in a separate video from the farthingale. So you may see a bit of repetitive footage across both videos, and for that I apologize, but it's because I started this thinking that they were gonna be all one video and then decided partway through that no, it's probably better if it's two separate videos. So apologies for any repeated footage, but that is why. So yeah, only the farthingale for this one. But yeah, let's get the waistband and the ribbon done. Trying to be careful about the pins. I'm a dumb, and I didn't quite account for the width that I actually needed on the waistband the first time I measured and cut it, so I have recut it to be the proper width, because I forget, you're stitching a certain amount down from the edge and then you're folding it over itself and over to the back, so I actually needed like a little over 2 inches to have the seam allowance on the front plus the seam allowance on the back, and enough to get to that point, and I've given myself a little bit of excess just to make sure I'm catching the waistband the whole way through. But I have the new version, which is about 2 1/8 inches to account for a 5/8 seam allowance 3 times technically, and I have it pinned along the front, the correct side. I have it right sides together, so that way I will stitch 5/8 from the edge, and then I will fold this over itself and then over to the back and stitch again along that same spot in order to catch it. And the ribbon should be caught at least in the first stitch, if not in the second one, and that way it's not gonna like slide and move around too much, because I don't want this to act like a drawstring. So let's get the waistband stitched on. Waistband is on, I am just threading the reed into the channels on the inside, and then once I get all the way around, I'm trimming off the excess and adding one of these connector brackets to hold the ends together on each one. And then I'm going to trim the hem to be level and fold it up an inch and thread one more hoop into the bottom, because it does instruct to do this regardless of how far it is from the next hoop above it. So even though it's going to be a shorter distance here, I am going to go ahead and put the last reed so that it has that extra weight and shape. And it instructs to leave 3 inches open, just like with all the other ones. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to hand stitch the casings shut once the hoops are in, just so I don't have any potential problems with the hoops trying to go one way and the machine trying to go the other. So that's what we're doing now. Been inserted into their channels and bound at the ends, and I connected 2 hangers to the hem and hung it on my shower curtain rod in order to trim, I connected 2 hangers to the waist, not the hem, and I was trimming the hem by getting it high and level so that I could cut level. So now I'm going to fold up the hem edge 1 inch into the garment and stitch it as close to that edge as possible. I may do a very tight zigzag stitch or overlock stitch, leaving 3 inches open, put 1 more hoop in, and then we're going to sit and hand sew all of the channels shut. Okay, so now we are down to the last step. I've got the hem hoop in, and I've reinforced several connections. I've pinched some of the brackets a bit more securely shut because the bones were moving a little too, or the reed was sliding a little too easily back and forth. So now I have my spool of top thread, a sewing needle. You can see my thimble on my hand already, and I've got snips. I'm going to be turning this lamp back on. I just have it off right now so that I'm not backlit. But now I'm going to be hand stitching the openings for threading the hoop in closed, and then any other spots that were missed. Like there's a spot along the hem about a foot from my actual opening where the stitching just didn't quite catch, so I'll hand stitch that. Any of these spots where I ran out of whatever tape I was using and had to start over with a fresh run of tape, I'll be just kind of whipping between the 2 materials there to reinforce that spot. We're just doing some hand stitching to finish this off, and she'll be all done.
Yeah, that was pretty enjoyable. I was gonna go on.
Always tucked into the waistband with only in front of responsible for one of the initial state by cottage core. And it seems to have
got all the stitching done, so just to kind of show you, I'm going to borrow this. I'm sure Sybil won't mind. I'm going to step in, wiggle it past. Now obviously I'm wearing modern clothing underneath it, and it's a little too big for my waist because I don't have the pair of bodies. But pan this down, you can see the effect where it stands out from my feet and my legs, and it will help to poof the skirt further out. This is so exciting. As thou may see now, dear friends, we have the completed farthingale for my ensemble. It may appear a bit misshapen at times as we are speaking here, due to the strong enough slight breeze that is pushing the reed into slightly different position. But I am quite pleased. We actually have already discovered that we will need to open the waistband and gather it down several more inches. It seems to be overlapping about 4 inches in the back now that I am laced down into the pair of bodies underneath it. So it seems I may have lost some weight since we last took measurements, which is not a problem at all. But I am quite pleased with the finished product. I do think that the material Alirien has chosen is quite charming. It should not be a problem underneath the final skirts, as the material is opaque enough and the colours dark enough that the green here, the rather vibrant green, should not be visible at any point, unless my skirt should happen to lift just enough to give a peek. I am very pleased. As you can see, now that the farthingale is done, you can see the blueprint of the silhouette that I shall have once the ensemble is complete. And with this farthingale done, once the bum roll is finished as well, we will be able to finally move on to the outer garments, and you will be able to see the vision really start to come together. I will say bouncing in it to get the wood to do its thing is quite fun, especially once it's on. Sometimes the rings will catch on each other, so a bit of a bounce to get the layers to settle themselves is quite amusing to do. But as with the previous pieces, I am quite pleased, and I am greatly anticipating thy thoughts, not only on this piece, but thy continued viewership of the next pieces as we continue this series. We thank thee profoundly for watching and do hope thou hast enjoyed this video. If you have, I am told you know where the various methods of showing thy love are located, but if nigh else, we do hope thou wouldst subscribe if thou hast not already. If thou desire more content like this video specifically, we have a playlist linked in the cards and in the description where you can find more costume related vlogs proceeding beyond the work on my garb here. If thou wouldst follow Alirien's adventures in other realms, you may find a Linktree portal in the description as well for her Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, X, and more. I keep glancing off to the side so that I can check with my with my associate. As always, we would like to give a special round of thanks to Alirien's coven of patrons who continue to be her biggest supporters. And if thou, dearest viewer, wouldst join their ranks, again, check that Linktree portal in the description for her Patreon, which begins at $1 a month. Gramercy again, stay tuned for my bum roll, among other things, and we shall speak to thee all very soon. Keep aiming, my loves, and anon, friends.